Vaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayat Nasta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Lagayate Girim Yat Kripatam Aham Vande Sri Gurum Dina Taranam. Okay. Text number 14. Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto. bhūta-sūkṣmendriya-mano buddhi-ādiṣu iha nidrayā līneṣu asati yas tatra vinidro nirahaṅkriyaḥ bhūta-sūkṣmendriya-mano buddhi-ādiṣv nidrayā nileṣv asati yas tatra vinidro nirahaṅkriyaḥ bhūta-sūkṣmendriya-mano buddhi-ādiṣv nidrayā līneṣv asati tatra vinidro nirahaṅkriyaḥ bhūta-sūkṣmendriya-mano buddhi-ādiṣv nidrayā līneṣv asati tatra vinidro nirahaṅkriyaḥ. Bhūta-sūkṣmendriya-mano tatra vinidro nirahaṅkriyaḥ bhūta-sūkṣmendriya-mano buddhi-ādiṣv nidrayā līneṣv asati tatra vinidro nirahaṅkriyaḥ bhūta-sūkṣmendriya-mano buddhi-ādiṣv nidrayā līneṣv asati tatra vinidro nirahaṅkriyaḥ. Mataji's. Bhūta-sūkṣmendriya-mano buddhi-ādiṣv nidrayā līneṣv asati tatra vinidro nirahaṅkriyaḥ. Anyone else? Okay, bhūta, the material elements. Sūkṣma, the objects of enjoyment. indriya, the material senses, manaḥ, mind, buddhi, intelligence, ādiṣu, and so on. Iha, here, nidrayā, by sleep, līneṣu, merged, asati, in the unmanifest, ya, who, tatra, there, vinidraḥ, awake, nirahaṅkriyaḥ, freed from false ego. Before getting further, Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalaka Chakshu Unmilitam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Sri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Vancha Kalpa Trubhyasya Kripa Samrivita Paritanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Translation. Although a devotee appears to be merged in the five material elements, the objects of material enjoyment, the material senses and material mind and intelligence, he is understood to be awake and to be freed from the false ego. So please repeat. Although a devotee appears to be merged in the five material elements, the objects of material enjoyment, the material senses and material mind and intelligence, he is understood to be awake and to be freed from the false ego. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti-vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The explanation by Rūpa Gosvāmī in the Bhakti-rasāmṛta-sindhu of how a person can be liberated even in this body is more elaborately explained in this verse. The living entity who has become satya-dṛk, Prabhupada says this word satya-dṛk means self-realized soul, who realizes his position in relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, may remain apparently merged in the five elements of matter, the five material sense objects, the 10 senses, and the mind and intelligence. But still he is considered to be awake and to be freed from the reaction of false ego. Here the word līna is very significant. The Māyāvādī philosophers recommend merging in the impersonal effulgence of Brahman. That is their ultimate goal or destination. That merging is also mentioned here, but in spite of merging, one can keep his individuality. The example given by Jīva Gosvāmī is that a green bird that enters a green tree appears to merge in the color of greenness, but actually the bird does not lose its individuality. Similarly, a living entity merged either in the material nature or in the spiritual nature does not give up his individuality. Real individuality is to understand oneself to be the eternal servitor of the Supreme Lord. This information is received from the mouth of Lord Caitanya. He said clearly, upon the inquiry of Sanātana Gosvāmī, that a living entity is a servitor of Krishna eternally. Krishna also confirms in the Bhagavad-gītā that the living entity is eternally his part and parcel. The part and parcel is meant to serve the whole. This is individuality. It is so even in this material existence. When the living entity apparently merges in matter, his gross body is made up of elements, his subtle body is made of mind, intelligence, false ego, and contaminated consciousness. And he has 5 active senses and 5 knowledge-acquiring senses. In this way, he merges in matter. But even while merged in the 24 elements of matter, he can keep his individuality as the eternal servitor of the Lord. Either in the spiritual nature or in the material nature, Such a servitor is to be considered a liberated soul. That is the explanation of the authorities and is confirmed in this verse. Jai Srila Prabhupada. So, this is a very esoteric, very intricate purport in relationship to us as conditioned souls, and wondering how and what we can do to come in contact with the Lord. And we see how the Māyāvādī philosophy is very powerful in terms of how they speak about who we are as an entity. So Srila Prabhupada debunks that particular understanding, Māyāvādī philosophy, in this particular purport. Bhakchamam abhijananti yavanyasatmi tatpata tato mam tatpato gyata vishate taranantaram. In the Bhagavad-gītā, it says that one can understand the Supreme Lord as He is, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by devotional service. And by such devotion, one can enter into the kingdom of God. So, this is a very important verse because the difference between Māyāvādī philosophy and Krishna consciousness is that the process of devotional service, a very important aspect. The Māyāvādīs do not perform devotional service. And therefore, when they're thinking of just becoming one with the Lord, that they become the Lord. But it's debunked here that that's not the reality. The reality is that we can understand Krishna, but that understanding comes through the process of devotional service. So if anyone wants to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they'll have to take to pure devotional service to Krishna, under the guidance of a pure devotee of the Lord. That's essential also. Otherwise, the truth will never be understood. One can never understand this truth unless one has the association of a pure devotee, a self-realized soul, who knows who the Supreme Personality of Godhead is. Not completely, but he knows the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Naham pakasa sarvasya. Krishna has the right. He can do it. He has the right to not be revealed to everyone. Just because someone has some speculation or desire to understand God, it's not that Krishna is obligated to expose himself to that individual. But there's a certain process, there's a certain qualification that's needed. Now, we talk about this idea of Brahman, because Māyāvādī speak about that also, this Brahman. So, becoming Brahman does not mean that one loses his identity. That's very important. We each have an identity and relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, when devotional service is there, when one actually accepts devotional service, there's three things that they have to, that we realize, that we become aware of, and that is that there's a God, that there's devotees, and that there's a process of devotional service. This is very important, because all of us were in this temple room together, but each of us are individuals. We have our individual identity. But what makes us all one? What makes us all one is a process of devotional service. So wherever there's devotional service, there's God. It's like here we have Krishna, Rukmini, Dwakadish, Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra, Gaunitai. God is here. The next thing is we have devotees. Look, all of us here, we're in this room. We're all devotees. And the other thing is devotional service. Each and every one of us here are engaged in devotional service, some aspect of serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the difference in terms of us being satisfied and knowing who we are. So this transcendental knowledge, it's never vanquished. As long as those three items are there, it's never vanquished. It's there eternally. And that's our natural position as servants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So liberation involves getting freed from the concept of material life. That's the essence. We have to get rid of that concept, because this is what binds us to this world. So the process of devotional service is to get rid of that material concept of life, thinking we're this body and that we should serve the body, serve our country, do so many things. And so this devotional service, it really helps us get rid of that kind of identity. And so we can enter into the abode of Krishna with our individuality through the process of devotional service. And we can see as we go on, we become more and more purified, we become more and more knowledgeable about that understanding. We actually feel that we're a devotee, that we're serving Krishna, that we love Krishna, that we chant Krishna's name. So that realization comes, and that individuality is more and more progressive. It becomes more and more realistic, more reality as we continue on with our devotional service. Brahma bhuta prasanatmana sochitina kankshati samasa vesha bhuteshu madbhaktim labate param. Yes, it says that those who are transcendentally situated, this is very important, to be transcendentally situated, one realizes the Supreme Brahman, Krishna, the personality of Godhead, and becomes fully joyful. This is the symptom of Brahman, joyful. Prabhupada has said so many times that devotee is never unhappy. Devotee is always happy, joyful. This is Brahman, joyful person. Also, it's described that one never laments, no lamentation. Oh, I wish I had this, or I wish I had that. And that lamentation comes from desires. We want something. So when we want something, this desire, and we don't get it, then we have lamentation. This is not on the Brahma Bhuta platform. And I think that in that particular position too, it's got equally disposed also, equal to all living entities. We don't discriminate. All living entities are in this conditioned material world. And then by that activity, by that understanding, one attains devotional service. That's when someone gets devotional service, when we have all this understanding of Brahman. So, without this understanding, even that Krishna consciousness becomes very difficult. So, it means that if we actually are engaged in devotional service, we can understand the position of the Supreme Lord. Not fully, but we can understand that there is a God. We can understand there's a devotee, and we can understand there's devotional service. And that's what the whole Krishna conscious movement is about. That's what this temple is about. It's to develop our Krishna consciousness. And that at a particular point, we can understand that we're not these bodies, that our senses are like uncontrolled. But by the process of devotional service, Prabhupada gives the example that when one becomes self-realized and Krishna conscious, it says that the senses are like serpents that has broken teeth. No one is afraid of a serpent with broken teeth. And so in the same way, what happens to the senses, they become automatically controlled by the process of devotional service. Automatically that happens. And automatically one develops love more and more for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So in all of this, in all this idea, this understanding, the soul is actually very important here, this aspect of the soul, the living entity. And the soul is described as Mahan. Mahan means great. The soul is very great. And why is it great? The soul is great because it's above everything. It's above the senses. it's above the objects of the senses, it's above the mind, it's above the intelligence. So the soul is great, it's Mahan. And understanding our constitutional position of the soul is very essential. We have to understand this point. It's essential. And it's the way that one can achieve that is by utilizing the intelligence to understand the soul and the engagement of the mind. Very important. So the idea is that the soul is there, the intelligence is utilized to understand the soul and the activities of the soul, and to engage the mind in Krishna consciousness. This is what, it's actually very scientific. So, but first of all, we have to understand the soul is there. Of course, we have the sense objects, we have the senses, we have the mind, and then we have the intelligence. And from the intelligence, it goes to the soul. So the soul is the main ingredient. And in order to utilize this understanding, we have to use the intelligence, discrimination. We have to learn how to discriminate in Krishna consciousness. And that discrimination power comes from the execution of devotional service by the purification process. So another aspect of development of our Krishna consciousness is described as jnana vairagya yuktena. Yes, jnana vairagya yuktena. This is very important because we need to have jnana and yuktena. This activity of having knowledge, intelligence, knowledge, and renunciation. These two things are essential for the progression of our spiritual life in Krishna consciousness. Knowledge and renunciation are essential. Without knowledge, we cannot have any idea of realization. That's why it's so important for us to distribute knowledge. Prabhupada wanted this book distribution to be the biggest process of the ISKCON movement. He wanted books before he wanted buildings. And the reason for that is develop this knowledge, to give everybody the knowledge of the self, the soul. And from that, all these other things will come. The buildings will come, this will come, that will come. All the different necessities will come. But the number one process, extremely important, is this knowledge and this renunciation. We see that in Krishna consciousness, we follow the four regulative principles of Krishna consciousness, and that's renunciation. But we see that renunciation, if we utilize our intelligence, we'll understand that renunciation is our liberation. We become freed, we become liberated from the bodily consciousness of life, which is the ingredient that binds everybody to this material world. Wanting bodily necessities, thinking that we're this body. These things are very detrimental to spiritual realization, the progression of spiritual life. We have to understand. So that intelligence is very important to discriminate what should we do and what we shouldn't do. So I'm thinking Hrishikena, Hrishikesha Sevanam Bhakti Uchite, right? Yes. That we have to learn that Krishna consciousness is engaging in devotional service. Sarvapadi vinir muktam tatparatbena nirmalam Hrishikena Hrishikesha Sevanam Bhakti Uchite. Yes. The process of devotional service is very important. Engaging the senses in the service of the Lord, it purifies them. Krishna is the master of the senses. And it's described that when we are in this particular platform, in this level of devotional service, there's two side effects. One effect is that we become freed from our bodily designations, that we realize that we're more than just this body. And we also have our senses purified. This is also very important, purification of the senses. So the whole science of Krishna consciousness is so based on development of our realization, our spiritual life. And we see that if one is very sincere and very dedicated, all these things happen automatically. It's not like there has to be an artificial imposition. One simply has to just regulate their life, which is so important. Regulation is of the utmost importance. Getting up in the morning, coming to Mangalartik, chanting our japa, doing devotional service. These things are very instrumental in the progression of a devotee's spiritual life. And we have to accept those things as being the essence of our relationship with Krishna. Then we understand our Brahman position. We understand that we're a spirit soul, that we're part and parcel of the Supreme. This is the process in order to understand that. So we can see that in the material world. We have so many attachments. Everyone has attachments. It's a natural ingredient of the living entity to be attached. It's not something that's, weird, or we're all attached. One way or another, we're attached. So that attachment to one particular thing can be detrimental, whereas the same kind of attachment for Krishna can be beneficial. So really, the consciousness, what our consciousness is, that is the platform for all attachment. What we're thinking, what is your consciousness? If you're thinking material, then you become attached to material. If you're thinking spiritual, then you become attached to spiritual. So the consciousness is extremely important and very powerful in the advancement of Krishna consciousness. So to purify the consciousness from material to Krishna consciousness, if one can do that, that's considered liberation. You're liberated. You'll feel the essence of Krishna consciousness, and you'll feel liberated. So we can see that it's a natural ingredient for the soul to have attachment. Sometimes you can just sit out here. If you stand out here in the front, you'll see that there's so many people that come walking by, and we can see that some people, they're really attached to having children. They want children. It's a natural attachment, But you see that if people don't have attachment for a child or don't have a child, they become attached to a dog or a cat. And you can see that going on. Just go outside. You'll see so many people, and they have so many dogs. They'll sit there, and as the dog poops, they'll watch the dog. Then after the dog's done, they'll have a bag and they'll pick up the stool. That's attachment. That is real attachment, you see. Just like a mother that has a child, and the child does the same thing. And the mother does out of love for the child. The mother will do that. We may think it's gross, but the mother sees it as loving service to the child. And she's happy to do that service. So we see these people out here, they're so attached, they'll pick that up, in a loving fashion for the dog. And they'll wait there patiently while this goes on. It's amazing how powerful this attachment ingredient is. So, and it's all based on consciousness. Where are we? What are we thinking? What's the process? Is our consciousness developed to think about serving Krishna, or is it to develop consciousness for attachment for our senses? So this is the crux. So our attachment for things perpetuates our entanglement in this material world. And we need to clear the consciousness. We need to purify the consciousness. And that is the science of Krishna consciousness. To engage in devotional service, to understand that I'm a soul, a spirit soul. And of course, we can't do this on our own. We see we're in Krishna consciousness, how do you do it? Well, you see we have Srila Prabhupada. It's only by the association of a pure devotee, isn't it? That's how we can overcome this. What's that? Lava matra sadhu sangha sava siddhi hoy. 1 second of association of a great soul, our consciousness changes. Just that quickly. And we know that we've experienced that ourselves. That, I remember when I joined Krishna consciousness, I heard Prabhupada's lectures, although I didn't understand a lot of the words that Prabhupada was saying. They had these cassette tapes. I could hardly understand what Prabhupada was saying in the lecture. But I felt it, I felt there was something here. I don't know what it was, but there was something here. But then I recall, I'll never forget the first day that I saw Srila Prabhupada. You can never forget it. Yeah, it was Lava Matra Sadhu Sangha. Yeah, you felt the presence of Srila Prabhupada. The power emanated from him. His purity was so powerful that you forgot everything material. And you forgot all about your attachments. Whatever attachments you had in considering the material world, you forgot it. You didn't even think about it. The only thing you wanted to do was be in the association of Srila Prabhupada. So that is the essence. And that's important for us to get that attachment for a great soul. Shushushro sharadhanasya vasudeva kataruchi syan mahatseva vipapunyachata nisevana. If we serve those great souls, yes, those great souls, there's great souls. And if we serve them, this is great service. We've done a great service by doing that. And from that particular service, we gain the affinity to hear the messages of Vasudeva. And how glorious is that? That, most of you here are not Prabhupada disciples, but you do have the great opportunity of associating with a few of Prabhupada disciples here. And if you just try to talk to them and try to get what the essence is, what they're feeling, they can tell you, they'll love to tell you what their feeling was of Srila Prabhupada and how they wanted to serve him and help Srila Prabhupada's mission. So the preaching, this is, Krishna consciousness is about preaching by our activity, our example, by our consciousness, by our service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to each other. How do we treat each other? Essential for our progression in spiritual life. And we see that in the material world, real education is actually needed. People don't have any spiritual education. They're just enraptured in their material life. They're simply enraptured in sense gratification. They're in deep darkness on the bodily concept of life. Deep, very deep. To deal with the dog, very deep. We can't even imagine the kind of darkness that they're involved in. And so we see that the misguided, blind people, they're being misguided by the so-called leadership of the world, of America, of the city. This is our leadership. They're blind. They're simply attached to so many mundane things. Their consciousness is focused on sense gratification, bodily platform of life. So they're bodily conscious and they're completely attached to it. Therefore, these men, they're called mudhas. It's a mudha. They're ignorant. They have no understanding. And the devotees, vidvan, knowledgeable. This is what our position should be, vidvan. We should tell people that what they're doing is actually a waste of time to a certain degree. We know the world has to go on. But, Sanātana Gosvāmī, when he first met Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu, his first question was, well, who am I? What am I? Who am I? And then his second question was then, why am I being battered by the threefold miseries? Adidayavik, avyatmik, amyatmik. Yes. He's saying, I'm suffering. That's what he was saying to him. So we have to admit to ourselves that we're suffering when we're on this material consciousness level. We suffer like anything. And so we need to get off that platform. And we have to come back and go to the Brahma-bhuta platform to serve Krishna in the temple, do service, chant, preach, distribute books, cook for Krishna, serve Krishna on the altar. These are all Brahma-bhuta platform activities. And that should be our consciousness. And if it's like that, then we can actually become liberated. We can experience what Krishna consciousness really is. Okay, I think we're done. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.